Yes. When I was just a little kid growing up, I could see people's auras. You know, I had the gift of clairvoyance. And it got me in a lot of trouble because I'd have kids come up, you know, and they'd have these dark spirits around them. And I'd go, boy, you're paying attention to much darkness. And they'd start beating me up because these spirits would tell them to beat me up. And so it was quite interesting. And when I got to the age of 13, we had moved to a new town in southern Utah. And a lot of the kids weren't doing good things. They were doing a lot of bad things. And for the first time in my life, I was taught to smoke and to drink and to do things that young boys, you know, really shouldn't be involved in. And we sloughed school and went up skiing one day up at Bryan Head, which is the local ski resort up the mountain from Cedar City. And I found 2/5 of whiskey in the snow, and I sat down and started drinking, and I woke up 3 days later with the worst cotton mouth of my life, and a little note on my pillow from my mom said, "We hope you've learned a very valuable lesson." That's how my parents were. They didn't fight much. Actually, they didn't fight at all, and it was a great way to grow up because my dad was a Catholic, but he didn't go to church. My mom was Mormon, and she didn't go to church either. We every weekend usually went out and enjoyed nature, which was a great way to grow up. But when I came back from that experience, I could hear the voice of what was to me Jesus. And I could talk to him, I could listen to him, and he helped me a lot to shift what I was doing. And I had to give up all my old friends, so I kind of went friendless for a couple of months because my old friends were doing bad things, and I was told by this voice, don't do these bad things anymore. And my older brother was actually came home from Vietnam, and he was schizophrenic. And I could see these dark spirits around my brother telling him to do things, and he would do them. And so I chose very early, when I was 13, that I was not going to listen to those dark spirits around, that I chose only to listen to the higher vibrating light spirits. And so as I grew up, I actually joined the Mormon church and went on a mission down to Puerto Rico, which is down in the Caribbean. And I was in a place called Hato Rey, which is a little suburb of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and we were riding our bikes along the road, going to meet with somebody to teach them, and this car veered totally off the road and hit me riding my bicycle, and threw me and my bike up against this telephone pole, and I lost consciousness. I was, unaware of even what happened to me. And I woke up in the hospital there in Hato Rey and had a sheet over my head. And I was like wondering, God, what the heck? And so I sat up, threw the sheet off of me, and the nurses started screaming, "Estaba muerte, he was dead, he was dead." And I said, "No, I'm estoy vivo, I'm alive." And it was kind of interesting because the doctor came in and he asked me if he could re-x-ray me because I was walking and talking and, I was very much alive. And he showed me my first x-rays, which showed a broken neck, a broken back, a broken right femur. And he said he confirmed me as dead. you know, about 15 minutes previous to this, and he had gone to work on somebody else. And anyway, he re-x-rayed me, and there was no signs of any breaks in my body. And he was just amazed. He says, "You're a walking miracle." And it was really interesting because when I came back from that near-death experience, I came back with what they call clairsentience. I could feel what was wrong with other people. Literally, I could stand outside the door when I started medical school and went through the first couple of years and then started doing our rotations with the regular doctors and the residents. I would stand outside the door of a room and I could tell what was wrong with the person inside the room with the door shut, because I could feel it in my own body where, you know, if their liver was having a problem or their heart or kidneys, whatever. And I would sense it in my own body, and it was 100% accurate. In fact, the chief resident accused me of going in and reading the charts early in the morning because I was so accurate. And it was quite interesting because it made medicine very easy. I knew what was the diagnosis and what was going on with people without even being in the room. And when I did my first rotations as a third-year medical student, we were at a place called City Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to St. Louis University Medical School there in St. Louis, Missouri in the U.S. And my very first time in the night before, I read about how to deliver a baby because I was on the obstetrical ward and working with the obstetrician and gynecologist. And my first assignment was to go in and watch a delivery. And so I went in this room, and there was an intern sitting down in the chair down at the bottom of the bed. And this young gal, about 14 years old, was screaming bloody murder. And she was hard into labor, and all of a sudden she gave this huge scream, grabbed the intern's arms. And back then it was when AIDS first came out, and everybody was scared to death of bodily fluids, and they didn't know who was infected, and there wasn't a lot of good testing. And so we wore gowns and gloves and a mask over our face to keep the bodily fluids out. And this gal, she was screaming really hard and grabbed a hold of the intern's arms. She kind of set up and grabbed his arms, and literally with these big fingernails, she drug across his arms and pulled the gown off and actually cut into his arms with her fingernails. And her bag of waters all of a sudden burst. And so here he is exposed. His skin's kind of been stripped off, and he's bleeding, and he's got all this fluid from the amniotic fluid of the baby, and he's scared to death. And he throws his hands in the air and he says, "She's yours." Now, he didn't know this was my first observation of a delivery. And so when he left the room, it was just me and this screaming patient getting ready to deliver. So I sat down, and I'd read about doing a delivery the night before, and had read about, you know, how to repair an episiotomy and everything. And thank God my grandma had taught me how to darn socks and sew a little bit. And she gave another big scream, and out comes this baby. I mean, and it came so fast, I didn't react fast enough, and my hands got around the baby, but it came out so fast and so slippery, it slipped through my hands, kind of went down into my lap, and then down into the bucket that catches the placenta and the afterbirth. And here I was just going, what just happened? And the mom, the mother of this young girl, was sitting there, and she goes, "Where's the baby?" And I said, "The baby's okay. The baby's in the baby bucket." And so I got the baby out and put the baby up on this gal's lap, and the mother was just, you know, happy as could be, because here she's a grandma, and the mom was happy, and none of us, you know, really knew what happened so fast, because it was just so fast, because she was just out of control. And she had cut through her vagina into her anus with the delivery, because it wasn't very well controlled. And I ended up having to sew a 4th-degree tear, they call them. So I was, you know, putting together the anal mucosa first, and then I grabbed the sphincter and put it back together, and you know, I did exactly what it told me in the book, but it took me literally an hour and a half to sew her back together. It was quite an occurrence, and but it's kind of an interesting story, because it shows you how things, I was just baptized. And I missed the whole part why I was telling the story. When this baby was coming down through the birth canal, all of a sudden the heavens opened up, and instead of paying attention to the baby, I was watching this spiritual occurrence of the heavens opening up and bringing that soul down into the baby. And as the baby took its first breath, the soul went into the baby. And I was so fascinated with all of that going on, I forgot to catch the baby. So it was, you know, I had to learn to be quicker and watch what was going on a little quicker. And so one of the reasons I became an OBGYN is I became very addicted to watching the heavens open up as these babies would come in. And it was just exciting and wonderful, and one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my life. And here I was in a profession that this would happen all the time. And it was just absolutely wonderful. And it was quite fascinating, because I was very interested in genetics. And so even in college, I studied genetics quite a lot. And I knew all these genetic problems that the babies could be born with. And when I became an intern and we started doing the prenatal care of these women, we started experimenting. You know, very early on, I was a Zig Ziglar sort of person, and Earl Nightingale, these really positive mental attitude people. And I believed that by being in a space of a positive mental attitude, you can alter your reality, because that's what I was taught. And so these women we were taking care of them, their prenatal care, many of them were having a lot of problems. Some of them were addicted to heroin, some of them were addicted to different other drugs, cocaine, marijuana, different things. And we, as a resident, we would do amniocentesis, because we were training, and so we'd do it on most of these women, and we'd find a lot of genetic defects in the babies. So when we would find these, we would teach the women to have a better mental attitude, to send love to the baby, to visualize the baby being perfect, to listen to good music, you know, all these different ways. Oh, and definitely eat a better diet. We were able to communicate with the social services, because some of these women were not getting good nutrition, and we actually were able to find nutritionists from the nutrition school being trained in nutrition. We would have them go to these women's houses and teach them how to eat better and actually have better food delivered to them. And between all these things, even with an amniocentesis telling us the genetics were not perfect, that there was a genetic abnormality such as Down syndrome or Creta cat or any number of different problems, these babies would come out absolutely perfect. And we'd retest their genetics, and their genetics would be perfect. And it was very curious to us as doctors how the mind and the love and the communication of the mother and the nutrition could alter the genetics to being perfect. And so this kind of set me up for my future, because this was clear back in the early 80s that this was happening. And by the time I became a full-fledged OBGYN, you know, I was teaching everybody about this because it was totally incorporated into my belief system. And the women loved it because they loved communicating with their babies and telling the babies they loved them, and they loved eating better because they felt better. It was quite amazing how nutrition just had gone out of vogue, and a lot of people were doing McDonald's and Burger King and things that, you know, weren't as good of nutrition for them. So when I was down in Phoenix practicing as an OBGYN, I developed this pain in my right shoulder, and I was starting to get headaches and back pain. And so we got a brand new MRI machine there at Good Sam down in Phoenix, Arizona, where I did my residency, and I was really good friends with the radiologist, and he says, hey, let's put you in this brand new MRI and see what's going on, what might be causing your headaches and pain. And he put me in, and he came back and he says, Scott, you're in trouble. You've got 3 tumors on your brain and 3 on your spine, and it looks like malignant melanoma. So you need to go get a biopsy on that lesion on your back. And so I did, and it turned out to be invasive malignant melanoma, and with the other tumors on my spine and in my brain, I was diagnosed with stage 4. And I went to the oncologist who deals, you know, the specialist with cancer, and he told me if we do surgery, you'll probably lose the use of your body. We can't guarantee anything. Chemo makes it grow, radiation makes it grow, so we can't use any of our tools to heal you, so you might as well go home, get your house in order, you'll be dead in 2 months. And I was like, holy cow, how'd this happen? So I went home that night, kind of despondent. I prayed very hard, and all I heard all night with all my intuition and tools was the name Hulda Clark. And I had no idea who Hulda Clark was. So the next day I got up and I figured I'm going to keep working because I know I'm going to beat this cancer. And my desk at the hospital had been totally cleared off, and there was an article by a Dr. Hulda Clark, who was a microbiologist out of Chicago, Illinois. And the article was about how parasites, fungus, virus, and toxins cause cancer. And in the article it talked about how she had found it in every microscopic slide, these organisms. And so at the end of the article, it made sense to me. So at the end of the article was her telephone number and address. And so I dialed her phone number. And back then we had the rotary phones, and so I was dialing her number, and she actually answered the phone. And for an hour and a half, we had a conversation about what was going on in my life. And she told me exactly what I needed to do to cure my cancer. And so I started doing parasite cleansing, antifungals, antivirals, and detoxing through chelation therapy, and doing Esiac tea and cat's claw and some other things that she told me about. And I did everything she told me except divorce my wife, because she told me I was in a bad relationship and I needed to get out of that relationship. And so, you know, being a Mormon, I had been married in the temple, and you just don't get divorced like that. So I stayed married, but